homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here, welcome back to my kitchen. I'm wondering if you guys have potatoes that you grew last year that look like this, because this is what happens to me every single year. They start sprouting as early as December when I pull them out of the ground in September. And by February, they are basically a giant pile of spaghetti. And so I'm going to go through these today and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with them. Basically, you have two options. You can freeze them or you can can them. And I'm going to do some of both. There'll be two different videos. I'll show you how to can in a different video. But in this video, I'm going to show you how to freeze them. And that is going to entail blanching them, which means putting them in boiling water briefly to stop any kind of enzymatic reaction, and then just throwing them into freezer bags. So potatoes, how to process them for long-term storage. Let's get started. I've got a whole variety of different kinds of potatoes in here. Most of these are basically yellow fleshed potatoes in one way or another. When they're small, I'm going to chop them and blanch them and freeze them with the skins on, because peeling potatoes when they're small like this is a nightmare. When they're big, I'm either going to turn them into French fries or I will peel them and can them. So I'm going to basically sort everything right now, and I'm going to pull out anything that's rotted or that's just too soft to use. But most of these are still, even though they're a little bit wrinkly, they're still firm enough that I can easily salvage them. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. They were sprayed off when I put them in this box in the fall, but they were not really scrubbed. And then I've also got some stuff in here. This is from a gopher. And thankfully, potatoes are really good at scabbing themselves over, and so even though this has got a big gopher eating hole in it, it's still nice and solid. Really tiny stuff that's kind of small and wrinkled like this, I will probably just toss. This is probably not worth my efforts to keep going. So yeah, I'm gonna start taking off all of these spaghetti strands. I could also plant these, and that's the other thing, is you can just put these in the ground, and people get really freaked out by how long these are. If you're planting them in the ground and you've got a really long stem like this, just coil it around in the soil and then cover it with soil. It doesn't have to be straight, and that way you can bury the whole thing instead of having it stick way up, because you don't want potatoes to be super deep in the soil. When they're buried too deep, they don't grow well. So got all the sprouts cleaned off. And I'm going to do two different kinds of potatoes. I'm going to do some that are just in chunks, because we really like just a small dice roasted potato. But we also like hash browns. And so I'm going to do some of these, especially the really small ones, as hash browns, and we're gonna par cook them, and that way when you actually go to make hash browns, they cook pretty quickly because they're already partially cooked. You can see I've got green on here. I'm just gonna go ahead and scrape that off. Green does not make the entire potato poisonous. It's a bit of an urban myth, but you don't want to eat the part that's green. And so I'm just gonna do a little scraping off of these as I go. And then I'm just gonna give everything a bit of a scrub as needed. And there's a reason I haven't done this all winter, because it's a little bit tedious. But I gotta tell you guys, being able to just grab a frozen bag of potatoes and throw them in the toaster oven and cook them off for breakfast or dinner, really, really nice. So this is worth the effort. We just don't eat a ton of potatoes, so I always have more at this time of year than I expect I'm going to. And you can see how tedious this is. I do not want to have to hand peel all of these small potatoes. So I'm just going to kind of selectively clean them up. All right, I'll bring you guys back when I'm ready to start putting some stuff into some hot water or into a food processor. So I've got my shredder blade in here on my food processor, and I'm just going to shred these up and use them for hash browns. And I like my hash browns with the skin on. All right, so I've got my diced potatoes diced, got my shredded potatoes shredded. These guys are gonna be canned or turned into French fries, so that's round 2. So I'm gonna bring this back up to a full boil, and then we're gonna blanch these diced potatoes. I'm gonna blanch these first. All right, so our water is pretty much back to a boil here. Let's see, we've got some bubbles coming. And I'm gonna blanch these for 3 minutes and then take them out, rinse them and cool them. And I'm gonna do this in batches because I want this to stay really hot. And if I dump all of those in here at once, well, 1, they're not gonna fit, but 2, it's gonna drop the temperature too much. And so I want my water to remain boiling when I'm blanching if I can. And so I'm just gonna put, a 1/3 of this in here and do these in batches. And this strainer is not actually the one that came with this particular pot. I think I picked it up at an estate sale. And so it's a little bit shallow. It doesn't go quite as deep as I would like. Maybe one more. Give everything a good stir so that I don't have any super hot or cold spots in there. We want even heating. And we're gonna set our timer for 3 minutes. And then we'll rinse. So this is my salad spinner, but I find it's really great for these kind of tasks where you need to pull something off and then strain it again. So I'm just gonna fill that up, let those cool. We'll make sure our water is back to a boil and we'll do round 2. So these have been cooled and drained. And because these will easily stay separate when I freeze them, I'm just gonna put them in a really big freezer bag and I can grab handfuls as needed. And so this is a 2-gallon freezer bag, which is quite large. And the other thing that happens here, because these have been blanched, is we've washed quite a bit of the starch off of the outside of these, and that is gonna help keep these from being a giant glob as well. But I've got a ways to go here. There's gonna be a lot more going into this bag. All right, so round 1. Got the cut potatoes done. I'm gonna do the shredded potatoes now. And I'm gonna try to do these all in one batch. It's probably not the smartest thing, but they're really thin, and so they're gonna heat up pretty quickly. And if you've ever read recipes for making hash browns in something like America's Test Kitchen or Serious Eats, they will often have you rinse the potatoes after you shred them, or at the very least, they'll have you put them in a dish towel and wring them out to try to get as much moisture out as possible. Some of that is actually about getting starch released, because hash browns, because you've cut so many cell walls when you shred them, there's a huge amount of starch released. And if you just throw them in a skillet raw, they tend to clump together in a big gob. And so by doing this, by blanching these and freezing them, I'm also getting rid of a ton of starch. And when I start these from frozen later, I like to keep the pan covered for the first 10 or 15 minutes. And so that allows the potatoes to cook, and they don't clump up because the starch has been washed off, and it gives them a chance to cook through. And then from there, I'll take the lid off and let them start to brown so that we get some nice crispy hash browns. This is not going to come as a shock to anybody here who knows me a little bit, but I don't tend to cook my hash browns in a huge amount of fat. So I'm not deep frying them. I'm just sauteing them in a couple of tablespoons of oil. And so I want them to be done all the way through and brown and crispy, but without just dripping oil in them. All right, we're going to give this 3 minutes and give that a drain, and we'll be done with this part. So when I feel these, it's obvious they're still basically raw. So these are not cooked all the way through. They are just blanched. And you can use ice for this. That's what you'll usually see. And I just find it fiddly. I think that cold water and a few rinses are going to do the exact same thing. And then I don't have to pick ice out of my potatoes. I don't have to use all the ice that's in my ice box. And right now these are room temperature or cooler. So I've managed to bring this temperature way down. And what I'm going to do with these are put them in my salad spinner and actually spin them to try to get as much water off of here as possible. I could put this in a dish towel and wring them out. I really hate that process. And then I've got a dish towel full of potato starch that I've got to wash. Not my favorite. So I put it in a salad spinner and call it good. The nice part about doing it this way is it is rinsing out some of the little itty bitty tiny pieces. And that is a nice thing to be able to do. Okay, so we've got this. And if there's a lot of water in the bottom of this, it will keep it from spinning fast. And so I often will run this once. You can see how much liquid is in there. And then I'll just dump out the moisture. And then give it a second spin. All right. You can see centrifugal force has pushed all the potatoes up along the edge there. We got a little bit more water out of that. I'll just leave it in here to drain. And then these are ready to bag up. So I like to make about 300 gram servings. That's enough for my husband and I for 2 serving bag. And so I just do these in fairly small quart-sized bags. And that way I can just thaw one of these out at a time. I kind of spread them out and make them flat, which means they thaw quicker. So we are on round 2 of the Great Potato Extravaganza. So this is the first giant bag of diced potatoes. This is the second not quite as giant bag of diced potatoes. This is what we have left. These are mostly the larger potatoes, and so some of these are going to get canned and some of them will turn into French fries. But I tended to process all the small ones because I wasn't going to have to peel them. And these guys all mostly peel, and it's less peeling if you pick bigger potatoes. And then this is the second round of hash browns. So I'm getting ready to put those into freezer bags. And here's what that will look like when those are finished. So about 300 grams. Which is about 2 servings of hash browns, which is about what my husband and I want for breakfast. And so we're just gonna do a bunch more bags of these, and then everything's gonna get stashed in the freezer.